I'm Tim,
I'm Bryce.
and we're back with another episode of The Average.
Whoop, whoop.
We're actually hitting one of our favorite. It was actually the movie that we kicked The Average off with so many years ago.
Was it really?
Yeah. We gathered all the guys together to review everybody's. It was one of our top movies at that time.
It was definitely the top movie.
It's still one of my top.
Still one of my top.
Still one of my top movies. But we kicked it off with the first Spider-Verse movie with Miles Morales.
Classic.
So many years ago. It's probably the first post on our Instagram if you scroll all the way back.
I did double check it.
Yep, you can scroll all the way back and check that review there. But we're here with the sequel tonight.
Across the Spider-Verse.
I can't get them straight. I mess it up every time I talk about it.
Single time.
Into, across, to whatever. It's the same way with No Way Home, Far From Home, and Going Home, Homecoming.
All I remember is Spider-Verse movies. That's how I'll reference them.
Yes, so they're the Spider-Verse. Miles Morales 2, Miles Morales 1.
Miles. That's funny.
Spider-Gwen 1. You could,
close enough. Anyway, Tim, would you like to go ahead and give us a quick little summary without any spoilers?
It seemed to me, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed that this movie actually picked up in the after credits of the first one.
In the after credits of the first one, kind of loosely, yes.
Yeah, because they pulled that whole.
It's not a direct follow up to that ending
because they mentioned time has passed, but also at the same time, I
don't think they mentioned how much time has passed.
No, they just mentioned that Miles is looking bigger, looking a little.
It's definitely been some time.
I think it's only 1 year because they mentioned him being a sophomore. I want to say,
no, because he just went to the school
as a freshman.
It had to have been a couple of years at least. You don't start talking college and stuff until you're a junior.
Okay, as somebody who taught at a junior high, we taught college and junior high now. So
I am getting old.
Well, I also think it's absurd to talk college and junior high, but
I think it is too. Anyways, hung up on the details.
Anyways, not a lot of time has passed. I'm going to say roughly a year has passed.
That's fair.
We actually picked the movie up, getting some background on the Gwen Stacy character.
Yes, an interesting move.
Yes, and it's fairly comic book accurate, whereas Miles is not comic book accurate, by the way. For those of you who are diehards out there. But how do you explain the plot of this movie? There's some Spider-Verse shenanigans. We find out that a villain of the week is not a villain of the week, and then things get real serious.
Kind of kicks it off, and we're if you remember from Into the Spider-Verse at the end, Miguel, Spider-Man 2099, kind of picks up at the end there and sets the tone of, someone broke the multiverse a little bit, and now it's our job to go and make sure everything is still okay, and that kind of leads us into this where things are not okay.
Yeah,
but it's a lot deeper than that.
Yep. You did better than I did at explaining
a lot of this story is just, it is the continuation of the Spider-Verse and how things are being affected because, it's said in the trailer already, No Way Home also was had an effect on what happens in this movie a little bit. And they just reference it lightly, but yeah.
Yeah, it was a nice little joke, actually.
It was a nice nod. It's joke. Okay, I like how this is in a bigger universe still.
I almost thought they were making fun of that movie, and I was a fan of it, so.
No, that's fair. But yeah, so that's kind of where we leave off with this.
So let's kick off story and plot.
Yeah, Tim, why don't you kick us off?
Do we want to read our...
Yeah, go ahead and read let's see. So we got my wife, Megan.
Yep.
In this one, we'll be reading her scores. And then who else we have?
I am going to be reading... I'm just going to call him Rich. I'm not going to throw the last name out there. Rich, I used to coach him years ago, and he's been a fan and been contributing and providing...
Cheers, Rich. Thank you for joining
commentary.
us.
Someday we hope to get him on a Discord and join us for the episode.
I love that.
Yep. But I'm going to be reading his scores as well. So we've got 4 scores to round us out tonight.
Okay. So what was Rich for story?
Rich kicked off the story at a 5 out of 5.
Okay.
His comment was, "It's good as hell." That's all he said.
All right, cool. Yeah.
So I'll pick up after that. I actually gave it a 5 out of 5 too.
All right.
This was a bit of a struggle for me. Because I'm not really a fan of multiverse stories.
I have a lot to say about that later on.
I'm really not, because sometimes they get a little confusing. Right. I don't like all the different versions of people who don't really matter ultimately. But this does a nice job of making different multiverse characters matter in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
They do a nice job of juggling that. They do a better job of juggling it than No Way Home. No Way Home?
No Way Home?
No Way Home does. They do a better they do a better job of justifying all these multiverse characters and why they exist
Some of them.
than No Way Home did. They do a better job of it than Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. They do a better job than what we've seen in a lot of things. However, I still don't think they nailed the multiverse quite the same as Everything Everywhere All at Once. But it's a very different, like, while it's kind of a similar vibe, these multiverses are also very different than Everything Everywhere All at Once, where Everything Everywhere All at Once branched because of decisions. This is like going back years and years that these branches have existed. But where this story really excels is keeping the focus on the characters.
Yes.
And that is something that I'm watching this movie and I'm thinking as I'm watching it that this franchise already, before I've finished the second movie, is probably up there with Sam Raimi's Spider-Verse trilogy. And I'm going to throw out number 3 for right now. But,
how dare you?
But the first two movies are up there in keeping this a character-focused superhero film. And even the Garfield Spider-Man did that. I have struggled with the Marvel ones because I don't think they've kept the character. They've kind of focused on the Marvel universe, not Peter and his relationships.
Right.
I mean, you got your MJ, whatever. Anyways,
but changes literally every single movie to a more likable character.
Yeah, it's
like, oh wow, we learned that from the first movie. Thank God.
And the story here really kept to what I want out of a Spider-Man movie, which is that Spider-Man is born out of tragedy.
Yeah.
Born out of tragedy, born out of multiple times in this movie, there are things said about like, we can't be everywhere. We can't save everyone.
Right.
And
exactly.
like that has always been that dynamic of Spider-Man has always been the core of what makes him so relatable. And this movie kept that at the story's heart while bringing in all this multiversal craziness that is actually, I'll get into that later. Like I did take a point off for that, but like the heart of this movie, the heart of this story is Miles and his relationship with his family, his relationship with Gwen. Like that is the heart of this, and they excel at making it a relatable and heartfelt story.
Yeah. Megan gave hers a 3 out of 5, and I'll keep all of her comments to the end because we did talk about it like on the ride home. So she gave it a 3 out of 5. I gave it a 4 out of 5. I like a lot of the beats you hit with it. Yeah, it is a character piece for most of the first half, and then the second half kind of goes into more of the action story with what's going on. I thought the story was brilliant in a lot of ways. I thought that this is one of the best versions of the multiverse, which I was going to make a point to what you were saying. Like, I think this movie kind of revealed to me that I'm kind of getting tired of the multiverse movies. Like, and I think it's just from the abundance of them. Like we still have Flash coming out. Then we have the second part of this coming out next year.
Yeah.
And I think like after that's done, if this is the trilogy, I'm kind of tapped out. Like
I don't want multiverse anymore.
Yeah,
I don't even like it in comic books. I read comic books every week for you listeners who don't know. Like multiverse is boring to me. It seems like a lazy way to write. Yeah,
and so far, like very few movies, Everything Everywhere All at Once, the Spider-Verse movies, arguably not even No Way Home really. Like Spider-Verse and Everything Everywhere All at Once have been the only movies so far to really like they've been able to tune it to where it's like, oh, this makes some sense. Like this movie story-wise makes sense as to why things are happening and why we need the multiverse and the Spider-Verse. And I think the story was very clever with how they handled all their characters, like even like some of the Easter eggs that never felt forced within the story. They kind of played a part with it. There's some other stuff I didn't care for, but that'll kind of go into. I think, like you said, there's some characters that they do use to serve a purpose, but I also think there's some characters that just are kind of useless and kind of just take up screen time, which is kind of why I took some points off. I just felt like the story was the one complaint I do have about the story is it was kind of bloated. They definitely tried to cram a lot in part 1, which makes sense because it's a part 1 of a part 2.
Yep.
But my issue was it got really bloated. It kind of felt way too long by the end. And I was almost kind of, I told Megan, like, I feel like I was underwhelmed because I started checking my watch a couple of times. Like, man, this movie's still going. Like, it just was a lot. And so, like,
I'll get into my thoughts on that too, because we had similar experiences.
Yeah,
but,
and some of that can go into direction, but we'll talk about that later. But otherwise, I still think the story was really well done, and there's a lot of cool stuff to chew on. Both with the characters, the overarch like of the Spider-Verse, and like all those twists and turns that come towards the end, especially. So a 4 out of 5 is where I kind of leave that.
All right. So let's then jump into our characters.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Rich gave this a 5.
Okay.
I gave this a 4. This is one spot where I docked points.
Okay.
And I don't think it's fair of me, but also I have to. So I don't think it's fair of me because while there is character growth in this movie, it's clear that the ultimate growth is going to come in the next movie. We get a little bit of growth in this one leading up to the major stuff that's going to happen.
It is fair because it's its own movie, so don't worry.
Well, and that's why like I want to say that there is character growth in here, but I was a little bit underwhelmed by it, and that's because I think they're leaving. I think they're leaving some of those big moments for part 2.
Wow, you hit it right on the nail, I think. Yep.
So like there's a really nice scene with actually some of my favorite scenes in this whole franchise so far is Miles just talking to his parents.
Oh yeah, totally.
One of the great things about the parents in this, I hate the Disney portrayal of parents always being bumbling idiots and stupid and never.
Mm-hmm.
And it is clear in this movie that Miles and his parents don't see eye to eye, but his parents love him and want the best for him.
They're good parents.
Yes. And they make that clear, and they make it clear that Miles understands that.
Mm-hmm.
He just wants them to back off a little. And so some of my favorite scenes in this are his interactions with his parents. And we get some nice character growth from Miles at the beginning talking to his parents.
A little bit, yeah.
There's a scene at the end where he's talking to his mom that we see some growth in, and it's nice, and I'll give it a 4 out of 5 because it wasn't quite the hammer home that I want to see. We did see some great growth out of, well, this movie really had a lot of growth for Gwen.
Yeah, Gwen takes kind of, I don't want to say shares, but, you know.
It's almost a 50-50 in this film.
It's kind of 50-50 a little bit.
And I wasn't too upset about it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Gwen in the first movie is an interesting character. She's super confident. Just a all-around cool character. This movie, you get that backstory, and all of a sudden you really feel for Gwen in a different way. And she had probably the standout character moments. But ultimately, like I would give her a 5, and Miles a 4. But it's kind of supposed to be Miles' movie. So
I can tell you're at conflict with yourself.
I am at conflict. So I just went with the 4 because I feel like the ultimate character growth from this is going to come next.
So allow me to just kind of soften your blow of what you feel so guilty about. Me and Megan both gave this a 3 out of 5. I was actually genuinely a little disappointed with the character work of this movie compared to the last movie. I'll talk about it more at the end, but I still think the first movie is definitely way better than this one, and a lot of it has to do specifically with the character. I agree with you. Gwen definitely shares the main stage with Miles.
Yeah,
and it's kind of funny because you definitely get to see the how they both like are struggling with the same things and how they go about it. They almost have actually a very similar arc the entire movie.
Yeah,
and I think my issue was that
and he even says it at one point. We are the same.
Exactly.
Like, and
my issue with it was that Gwen's has a little bit more resolution towards the end, in a sense, and Miles' story kind of feels repetitive and a little dry at one point. Like the beginning makes sense, and it's kind of like, okay, I'm on board for this. But I feel like, and I get it, there is the second part where a lot of the resolution will come. However, I am judging this movie solely on what it is and what I have in front of me. And because of that,
that's not fair.
That is fair because we are judging this one movie, not a two separate movies as in one.
Here's why I say that. Here's why I say that's not fair. Here's why I say that's not fair. Is because in the title it says part 1.
Yes, but this is a singular movie, and so therefore I have to judge it for what I have, not what will be.
Yes,
because part 2 could come out and the character arcs could suck. I don't think they will.
I agree,
but I have to judge it for what I have in front of me, and therefore
I'm just giving you a hard time because that's also why I gave it.
No, I know, and I get it, but I think it's fair because I do need to. I do want to explain, like, you know, I do think there will be that payoff for Miles and Gwen towards the end.
Yes.
And a lot of other characters. However, what I have in front of me is a character development that is almost non-existent. It's very repetitive. There's not truly a resolution by the end of this movie, which is understandable. However, with what is in front of me, I just don't think there's any payoff really. Miguel has a pretty good character arc, kind of. Not
I
really.
Didn't care for him.
Like he has a good start.
The character, but I did not necessarily.
But again,
like his
it's what
portrayal.
Miles is. There's a good start point, but we're probably going to see a resolution in the next movie. But I think I'm on board with it. He's kind of a cool antagonist, I guess you could say.
He's almost an anti-hero at this point.
It's not really a villain.
Like
but
he's trying to do the right thing the wrong way.
Spot is actually interesting. He kind of grew on me as the movie went on.
Yes, I had the same reaction because at first I was like, this guy's annoying. Get him away. And then we went through some transitions.
Here's the thing.
I was like, ooh.
Here's the thing about Spot, though. I want to see more in the second movie because this kind of feels like the backwards. I hope it's the backwards version of what we got with Thanos in Endgame, which Infinity War made him the best villain in Marvel history, and then Endgame ruined him.
Pooped on him.
Exactly. I hope this is the reverse where we have a good setup for him. He's kind of like one note of like, you know, you made me, I made you, and it's like, okay, this is a big baddie. He means business. Now I hope in the second movie they just kind of take that one step further. Yes. I'm not saying I have to sympathize with him, but I want to know like this guy is like, this is the bad guy. Like there are consequences, which I think. Again, direction and character-wise, there will be consequences.
Remind me to talk about Spot when it comes to like the direction and stuff.
For sure.
Because part of his character was directed so well.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, both threes for me and Megan, which will lead us then.
We have 3, 3, 4, and 5 on that. So music and sound. Rich gave it a 5. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually gave it a 5 because while there was no sunflower on this movie. All right. Cool. I still love Sunflower. It's a great song. There was no sunflower on this movie, but the music hit the appropriate emotional beats and the musical cues from the actual score are almost, I don't want to say almost, they are just as memorable and hit all the same beats as they did. Like, I don't want to spoil somebody who comes in the final act, but his theme was still... Like, it had a multiversal twist on it. It was the same theme from the other movie, just a little bit different. And it's a killer theme.
You better be careful. You better be careful, Tim.
It's so good. And then there's, like, the Spider-Man theme. And not the Spider-Man theme that necessarily from Miles, but, like, the Spider-Man theme started in the animated series years ago. Makes appearances throughout the score in slightly different ways. There were some really there's I don't know if it was his origin story, but one of the scenes with Spot almost had like horror movie strings. A little bit.
I think I know which ones you're talking about.
Yeah, like the score I actually think on this movie was better than the first one. I think the first one had better musical like numbers and accompaniment. I think the I don't want to say guest tracks, but like the actual tracks in this movie are not as memorable as the tracks from the first one. But outside of the one theme from the first movie, no, 2. I don't remember the music that much for the score. Whereas this movie, I thought, pushed that score a little bit more than the other one did. So I think your mixtape on this one, not as strong. Your musical score, a little stronger. So that's where I justify my 5 on that one.
Okay, I hear you. So Megan gave it a 5 also. Here's where I'm probably the unpopular opinion. I gave it a 3 out of 5. What's new? Well, that hurt, but okay. I'll let you have that as I always do. Yeah, I gave mine a 3 out of 5. I actually think the music overall was pretty underwhelming for the most part. I never had a moment in this movie where the music like truly accelerated and just propped up the moments, you know?
How?
Like, I'm trying to think of him. Like, the only moment where where I was like, yeah, that hit. I don't want. Sorry.
Was it the final act?
No, not the final
Okay.
act. It was kind of the middle part where, the shield and like it just goes silent and you're just kind of sitting there for a moment and then it's like, oh crap, we're going. Like in the trail. So they showed they already released the scene of him getting chased by the spider people. The scene right before that was the only moment where I truly felt like that punch of what I loved about the first movie, which was the absolute mastery of the music being placed in the right moments and just really elevating the sequence. I never had that moment in this movie outside of that one part, and I left kind of feeling a little underwhelmed. After the first movie, as soon as I was driving home, bam, I'm listening to the soundtrack.
Yeah.
I have yet to like listen to this soundtrack. I've had no like drive to like listen to it right away like I did with that first movie. And again, I'm not saying it's bad. I think it does sound good. And I will say, like, the theater I was in might have like had some sound like issues that were kind of killing it. Like from the very beginning, it kind of sounded off, and I didn't know if that was a theater or if that was the actual like movie.
No,
itself.
at the very beginning when Gwen was playing the drums.
Yes.
So in my theater, the music was way too loud, and I could barely hear Gwen talking.
And her voice was almost tinny, like.
Yeah, it was a little.
It was kind of weird. Okay, so it wasn't. So it must have been the movie.
Yeah, they might fix that later because if they get enough feedback. But I did notice right away. Like, I thought the scene was cool, and the editing with the timing of her rhythms were awesome. But I was like, the mixing on this is a little bit off.
Yeah. So now I know that it's like, okay, I feel confident saying like I think that just the mixing and the music wasn't quite what it was in the last movie for me. Like you said. I think the last movie does have a lot more of that mixtape feel, whereas this one's a little bit more of the score. And take that for what you will, I guess. But I just don't think they quite hit it out of the last movie. I'd say they hit it out of the park. I still think like the sequence of him like becoming like Spider-Man is one of the peak moments of movies that I've gone to in a long time.
And this movie tried to match that scene and didn't.
It
quite
doesn't work.
To it.
Like there's just not a moment like that, and so.
No, where I'll tell you later about another scene that I thought, like, in beauty is probably equivalent for me. But
I think I know which one.
It's not the same power.
But it wasn't bad. I just don't think it's nothing like the first movie was for me. So a 3 out of 5 is just kind of where I landed.
So there we have it, listeners. We disagree for the first time ever.
And that's the last time you'll ever hear it.
We disagree. The music worked for me. It didn't work for Bryce. But
so next up, the cream of the crop here, as you will. Shall I kick this off?
Well,
editing and effects.
Oh, I think we're pretty much unanimous on this one.
I mean, no.
Megan?
5.
You?
4.
Okay. Wait. What am
Just wait 1 minute. You gotta double check yours.
Wait, am I?
Our friend Rich also a 5.
Yes,
as well.
he was also a 5.
Yeah. What was yours?
I'm actually a 4.
I knew it. Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Want me to kick this off? Or you want to? You seem like you got something to say.
I feel like we might agree.
No, go ahead.
So the first movie was just beautiful across the board.
Amen.
On the editing, the effects, the artwork was unique and different. It did kind of take your eyes a second to adjust because of some of the things they did. I thought this movie...
the collider beam was
a
lot of colors.
I think this movie tried to do too much. That's my thought. I think they needed to tame it back. There were some moments that I thought the trying to take it further worked, where they would use colored backgrounds to kind of match a character's emotion.
Right.
I thought that worked. But then there were other moments where they would use... There's particularly a scene with Gwen and her father talking where there's like geometric patterns happening in the back. And I was like, what is that? It's like circles and triangles and they're all interconnected, and it didn't serve a purpose. And it felt like it was just trying to push that envelope a little bit, where the first one was bold and new. This one had a lot of those same great things, but it's like they tried to do some new stuff that didn't quite work. I give them props for trying, but there were a couple moments that it took me out. The one thing that I will defend for them is a lot of Gwen's universe or alternate Spider-Man's universes. Gwen's universe almost has this like digital watercolor feel to it a lot of times,
which is a nice touch to like separate the universes.
Yeah. Well, and that is almost exactly the way she was drawn in her first comic book series.
Yeah.
So they're really pulling from her comic book origins in that, and I love that. Even though it doesn't translate to screen as well as it does in the comic book.
Not quite, yeah.
I appreciate it. I still like that. It was those other things when they would just throw stuff in the background that seemed pointless that I was like, nope, you're kind of losing me on that one. But like you said, the differentiation between the multiverses is still cool.
Yeah, it's a good touch,
It's
and
still
it does
cool.
help.
Yep. There were just those couple things that like, why is that there that I wasn't a fan of?
Yeah, I almost went 3 actually with this, but I took it back to 4 after taking my head out of the gutter for a second because
you're just too harsh sometimes.
Sometimes. This one I was actually, well, it's because like you said, I think they tried to do too much on this movie because I completely agree with that. This like I had one complaint about the last movie, and it was literally just those the collider. The collider. Yeah, like the collider when it like blows up the couple times it does. Like that was my only complaint of the movie because it was just like really bright and caught me off guard. That is like tenfold in this movie. There's just so much sometimes that goes on, and don't get me wrong, there are some everything is beautiful in this movie. It is so well animated, and there are some gorgeous shots.
Yes,
if we're thinking of the same shot that is it when they're both like sitting next to each other talking from the trailer and hanging upside down?
Yes.
Bam.
Yep.
That was a gorgeous shot.
That I was like in awe. I don't know when it'll fly under this, but like that scene, it starts like there are a couple scenes in this film where we are watching them upside down, but the camera is right side up.
Yeah, you see it in the trailer.
Yeah, and it's super cool. But when it first happens and they go to sit on the underside of something, and that scene is not just like script is on fire in that scene, music is on fire on that scene, direction is on fire. Like that to me is that leap of faith scene.
Kind of. I think the leap of faith is a little better, but like landscape wise, I want it on a poster.
Yeah,
like, I want to put it up.
It's not the thrill of leap of faith. Like where leap of faith is the thrill and the culmination of everything. This is like the moment of heart that defines these two characters.
Yeah,
and it's done so well.
Yeah, it is. Like everything in this movie is gorgeous. The action sequences again are just top tier.
Some of the best Spider-Man action sequences. Period.
Oh yeah, it's great. But again, I took points off because there's just a lot that goes on. And honestly, it's overwhelming at times. Like
I actually didn't enjoy the thousands of Spider-Men because it was too much.
It was a lot.
It was
and that was the kind of the bummer of like trying to catch all the Easter eggs and then you miss some of them because it's just moving so fast. And again, it's just madness. It's fun when you're in the moment. But I think I did take some off. I think it does fall a little short because there's just a lot going on, and sometimes it's just overwhelming. If you have epilepsy, like
watch out.
Just don't go to this movie. This is not for you. But yeah, it's still gorgeous. It's still beautiful. Just be warned that it's a lot, and you're probably gonna be having to like rub your eyes a couple times and like just blink. Like, okay, I'm still here. We're good. So yeah.
All right. So we're actually in agreement. So we went from disagreeing to.
I was surprised. I thought you would give this a 5. I thought I was gonna be the.
I agree. As a graphic designer, the greatest thing I've learned is restraint, and I think this movie could have used some.
Amen to that.
Yep. So jumping into script, Rich gives it a 5.
Megan gives it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3.
Oof. I give it a 5.
I gave it a 3.
Ugh.
You want to go first?
Yeah. I actually think this script, I mean, it kind of goes back to the story, what I said in the story. The script does a incredible job with balancing family dynamic, friendship dynamics, all of this into a multiversal conflict that feels relevant. Nothing at any moment felt like super cheesy to me, that like no line was delivered that I was like, ugh, that was bad. And if it was delivered that way, it was on purpose. Like a couple lines the parents say to try to relate to Miles, and he's like, nobody my generation says that. Like,
right. Yeah.
It's all acknowledged. I think, again, while the story might not have matched the first one, I think the script is the same level of quality. They hit home with the characters. Each character has their unique way of speaking, your unique dialogue. It's not as funny as the first one.
There's something we agree on.
But I don't think it needs to be funny. I'm tired of the always funny.
No.
So,
We agree, but I think we have a different way of looking at it. But yeah, keep going.
well, like I didn't think of the quippy Spider-Man moments are there, but like we don't have Spider-Pig in this movie. We don't have Spider-Man Noir. Like they were the funniest parts of the other movie.
Yeah.
And they're not in this one. And
That's okay.
that's okay.
Nothing wrong with that.
And that's also why the humor felt like the humor worked, but it wasn't as funny because those two characters weren't here.
Right.
And I think they were the source of most of the jokes in the original. But I actually thought they did an excellent job with the script. So I'm with Rich on that one.
All right. Let me bring you all back down to earth here a little bit.
Below Earth. Because Bryce is being extra harsh.
Not being extra harsh.
Bryce's last script actually won an Academy Award.
What was that?
I'm just kidding.
Okay. Well, you know how I work in these settings, but yeah.
The writer's strike.
Oh, we love it.
That's why Spider-Man 4 is delayed, by the way, from Marvel. Not because
I'm okay with that.
They never had actually planned anything or said anything about it, but
totally.
now it's conveniently delayed because of the writer's strike.
Yeah, no, I'm totally okay with that. Take as much time as you want, because the longer we wait, the longer it is removed from the main Marvel universe.
It's so true.
And I'm okay with that. Yeah, I think the script served its purpose. That's the best thing I can say about it. To your point about the comedy, I actually think the comedy missed a lot in this movie for me. I did not find this movie as funny, both in the good way and the bad way. To your point, there's not as much of the Spider-Pig, Spider-Noir jokes, but I feel like they were definitely trying to bring that comedy from the first movie into this one even a little bit more. It kind of was like the animation. They overdid the animation from the first one. I feel like they overdid the jokes on this one. I just felt like the jokes were not landing in this one. It felt a little too forced, a little too much sarcasm. Someone I do want to point out, I know it could go to character too, but I don't like how they did the Spider-Man, Peter Parker from the first movie, the teacher Spider-Man. I don't know what you want to call him, like lazy Spider-Man.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I feel like they kind of gave him the axe a little bit in this movie, and that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, because
I thought it was pretty funny. So
see, I mean, that's just that there's a difference there.
Yeah,
Like,
because they definitely played into a cliche, like almost an Instagram joke that you would see with him
a little bit,
and I found it funny, but I see why not everybody would.
Yeah, I was kind of bummed
I was also
out
kind of
about that.
annoyed by him by the end of it. So I agreed with Miguel when he said, "I've had just enough of you."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the script was fine. It served a purpose. I think the jokes weren't landing. There wasn't there were a few moments where there was some really good like dialogue between characters, like Miles and Gwen, like when they talk with each other was kind of nice.
Yeah.
When Miguel's confronting Miles like on the train, like that's a good decent sequence.
Yeah.
I don't feel like the script really went above and beyond. I think it was fine. It did good. We might see better in the next movie. Again, they're trying to cram a lot into this movie. But yeah, there's just nothing special, I think, about this script. But that's not a bad thing necessarily. It kept it straightforward and let me focus on other things as well in the movie. But yeah, I kind of just landed out of 3 there.
All right.
So next.
So then off into the acting.
All right. Which is fun because they're voice actors.
Yes, they're voice actors. I actually gave them a 5.
Oh, okay.
I gave it a 5. Rich gave it a 5. For me, there were a couple times that I wondered if they'd recast Haley Steinfeld.
That does not sound like Haley.
Yeah.
Every time I watch these movies, Gwen does not sound like Haley at all.
Which to me is why it's a 5, because I want to not recognize I want it to be the voice of the character on screen, not the voice of the person behind the mic. And so for me, that's an excellent performance for her. And I still love Miles's performance. Really, his parents are fantastic. I love every performance in this movie. I think probably my biggest one, which we can't find him on IMDb. I don't know what we're missing, but Spot.
I know, yeah, Spot. He was okay.
Yeah, he was okay. He was probably my least favorite performance, but I think that's because we're leaving more for him later.
Right.
So
yeah. Excuse me. Me and Megan gave it a 3.
It's like you guys don't like movies.
Tim, do you want to get into it again? We can get into it again. You want to get nuts? Come on.
Let's get nuts.
I love when we can remember a reference together. Good moments. Yeah, I think the acting was good. Like, that's all I can really say about it. No performance really blew me away. I think everyone did good, like the last movie. Yeah, I wasn't really blown away by any performance. There wasn't really a performance that stood out to me. Nothing that was super memorable. And again, it's a little tougher because it's voice acting, so I don't want to sound harsh. Like, they all do sound really good. They all, like you said, I don't even recognize some of them sometimes when they speak. It's like, yeah, that's who's playing that. Well, who was it? It was the Spider-Man India Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I was like, I know that voice from somewhere, and I can't think of it.
What was his name in Deadpool?
Oh, what was his name? He was the guy, taxi driver in Deadpool.
Bill Pender.
Yeah. He was great. He did really good.
But as soon as it's the same voice, so I immediately was like, I've heard this guy before.
Exactly.
Where is he from?
But I think that kind of sums up where I was at. I was just like, no performance blew me away, but no one did a bad job. I think Spot even did a great job for what he was. It kind of grew on me as the movie went on. He was kind of weird at the beginning, but it was funny and it was cool. But yeah,
I will say his introduction scene was.
It's pretty funny.
I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
And that was a good intro.
So yeah, 3 out of 5. I think it was still good performances, but nothing crazy.
All right. So the direction then, Rich gave this a 4. Sorry.
Okay.
I gave it a 5.
Yeah. Megan gave it a 3.
Okay.
And I gave it a 3.
I gave it a 5. Because like we've mentioned multiple times is that they juggled a lot in this movie.
Right.
There were a couple times I checked my watch that I found they were more towards the middle of the movie. But for the most part, by the time they started to pull everything together, I wasn't disappointed in anything. Early on, I'm like, why is this here? And then like the character Spot. For a while, I was like, this has gone on too long. And then we realized that he's a little bit more significant than we thought. And it started to make a little bit more sense why we spent the time on that.
Right.
If anything, I'm not sure how responsible for the art direction the director is. I probably could have docked a point for what we said. It needed some more restraint. Probably all the way around. But I still, when it comes to directing this movie, these 2 movies so far are 2 of the best Spider-Man movies that we've seen.
Oh yeah, that was a funny thing I was thinking about last night because I was like comparing it to the other Spider-Man movies and where I was ranked it, because me and Megan kind of left a little disappointed with the movie, but then I started thinking about like, where does this actually rank with like the other Spider-Man movies, and it's still surprisingly very high.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I'm not sure. I do think, like you said, this is a part 1 and part 2 is going to tell us a lot.
Yes, exactly.
In my head, I had to, of course, make the comparisons to Infinity War and Endgame, whereas Infinity War kind of left everybody a little bit like, what just happened? And we didn't really know how good Infinity War was until we saw Endgame. And I think something like that's going to happen with this movie. Right now, you're either disappointed with it or you love it. And then seeing the third one is going to tell you if you love it more or are more disappointed with it.
And maybe disappointment isn't necessarily, you need a context behind that. Like, you're disappointed a little bit just because it's a part 1 and part 2. So obviously, like,
it's not complete.
Harry Potter Deathly Hallows Part 1 is a good example where it's a disappointing movie for the most part. But on rewatching it like a few times, I kind of grew to like it more and more. The more I watched it, like especially that animated sequence with the Deathly Hallows.
Yeah.
Ooh, spicy.
And Emma Watson.
Yes, also true. Also very true.
But yeah, I do think there's a lot about this movie that because we aren't behind the scenes, we don't have the script for the next. It's hard to accurately judge it, but judging based on what we've seen, I gave it a 5 because there are clear setups for something else that's going to come.
For sure.
And I'm going to put my trust in those directors and screenwriters that it will pay off better.
And it will probably pay off. Let's be honest.
It's going to pay off better than Endgame did. That's for sure.
Yes, I trust them.
So, because outside of the last 30 minutes of Endgame, the rest of that movie doesn't matter.
Yep. Yep, you're right. Yeah. Yeah, mine was a 3 out of 5, and a lot of it was just pacing. Like I said earlier,
the beginning felt slow.
This whole movie is bloated with a lot of stuff going on, And you can blame it on a story, you can blame it on a direction, whatever you choose to blame it on. But you know, it is the director's job to make a movie feel seamless and go and be a smooth ride. This one was pretty bumpy for me. Like, I just thought the pacing was off a lot of times. Like you said, the beginning can feel slow, especially when you start off with Gwen and then go to Miles. It kind of was like, I was like a 10-15 minute intro, like before we finally got the first, like, you know, credit of like, oh, there's Spider-Man.
Yep.
And I will say the balancing between you kind of have your parts of like Gwen, Miles, Spider-Verse, and then the ending. Like, it's a big there's 4 chunks of this movie, I think, if you split it all up.
Yeah, there was not
there's not great transitioning between the 4. Like, it kind of just happens and it's like, oh, okay, I guess we're here now.
Yeah, and it's not a clear like first act, second act, third act. It's definitely pretty jumbled, and I was trying to tell myself that's because we're watching act 1.5.
Yep, and they're trying to get everything set up for the second movie, which I'm sure will hit and will be awesome. But for the movie we have now, I was checking my watch thinking, man, this movie's still going. We're still, man, how much longer do we have? Like,
yeah, the hard part that I think is totally open for debate, like why we disagree on it, is the one thing I've gotten really tired with in comic books and in a lot of superhero stuff anyways, is the complete lack of personality and character that we're getting. Totally. Mm-hmm. This movie spends so much time on personality and character, though, that you are going to alienate the people who don't want that. You're going to alienate the people who are here for the superhero action, because for the first half of the movie, it's a lot of dialogue. Yeah,
I think there's a lot that could have been cut out. There's definitely some cutting you could have done in this movie to make this flow a little smoother.
Yeah. I am one who, like, I'm on the side of the dialogue. I think you need to spend 75% of the time out of costume, 25% in, because who we relate to is the person behind the mask, not the mask itself.
Yep.
And so I appreciate that, but I know other people aren't, and they're going to dock this movie those points because...
You know who does do that? Man of Steel.
Uh-huh.
I want to watch that movie again.
Also, just, you know who didn't do that? Matt Reeves in The Batman.
Oh, are you coming around to my side?
No, I still enjoy that movie.
Well, I mean, enjoy it, but like, I want to talk about that movie sometime.
But that movie was definitely like 90% Batman.
Absolutely.
10% Bruce.
Yep. So anyway, 3 out of 5. I thought the direction was pretty, not like super poor, but it wasn't quite there. So yeah. Next up, It Factor. Our boy Rich here gave it a 5 out of 5.
Oh yeah.
And Megan also gave it a 5 out of 5. What'd you give it?
I actually gave it a 5 out of 5.
Okay.
I mean, you have the sequel to an Academy Award winning film.
Yeah.
It's still early. We saw it opening weekend, but there were more people at this movie theater than there were for the last couple Marvel movies I saw. So I think that's a pretty good indicator that it's going to do pretty well.
No, yeah, I think it will absolutely do well. I gave mine a 4 out of 5. And honestly, I was just kind of thinking about, like, why would I give this a 5 out of 5, or why would I give it a 4 out of 5? Like, yeah, this is definitely one of the more hyped movies of this year. But also, it's only the second movie of this trilogy, that assumed trilogy. I don't know. Like, I just bounced between 5 and 4, and I couldn't find a good reason to give it a 5 off the top of my head. And it just kind of felt like, okay, we'll give it a 4 because I think it will do good. But it's also, I think part of it was, it's a sequel to a really great movie that surprised everyone, and the surprise
is gone.
Yeah, the surprise is gone now, so we need to see how this movie holds itself up outside of the first movie being the surprise and awesomeness that it was.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I landed on 4, just because I wanted to see what this one would do first, which I think it will easily make all of its money, because I think everyone should go see this.
Yes.
But yeah, 4 out of 5, still not bad at all.
So for our entertainment value, Rich gave it an 8.5.
Ooh, bringing out the decimals. That's a new one.
Yeah. I actually gave it a 9.
Okay.
Yep. I gave it a 9. I was thoroughly entertained. Like I said, I appreciated this movie. I think it slowed it down even more from the first movie and gave our characters time to live and breathe outside of costume.
Mm-hmm.
I deeply appreciate that, because I actually found some of the earlier action sequences boring. And that's where like my one comes in, is that I thought there were a couple action sequences and a couple scenes in this movie that I was like, I'm a little bit bored by this. I don't feel the stakes. I don't like, okay, let's get to the next part. But I was not disappointed by the character development. Oh, well, outside of what we talked about with Miles, but I was not disappointed in the characters' interaction. I was not disappointed in the conclusion of this film, even though it's not a real conclusion. I just feel like you said a couple times, I was toying with an 8. Like, it took too long to get there.
Right.
It took too long to get there. Definitely some trimming could have been done, but I'm not exactly sure. I actually think where that trimming should have been done is in the Spider-Man headquarters scenes.
Yeah.
I think those were a little bloated and could have cut that down, because I actually wasn't there for the cameos. I was there for the Miles Morales story.
Yep, exactly.
So it could have been I guess I probably could have gone down to an 8, but at the end of it, I just wanted the rest of the story.
Yep.
And so I say my entertainment value was pretty high, because I was disappointed that the story I was watching was over. Even though I thought it took way too long to get to that point,
yep.
I still wanted to keep going.
All right, you ready for the real low score here?
I don't want it.
Megan gave it a 5.
I can see it.
Yeah, Megan gave it a 5. I gave it a 7. I enjoyed the movie. It was a good movie. But like I said, it's a great movie, but there are imperfections, and they do show by the time you're done with this movie. Like I said, pacing is a big one. I think there's a lot they could have cut out of this. There are characters they even could have cut out of this, in my opinion. I think Spider-Woman was the weirdest addition, having a pregnant woman on a motorcycle fight and stuff. That was super weird and out of place.
That one I did not
hit for me at all.
Didn't quite get.
She could have been cut from this movie, and it would have changed a lick of the stakes or anything that happened.
Or even Spider-Punk. And
I actually like Spider-Punk.
As much as I like him, he did one thing that was significant.
2 things.
And anybody else could have done it.
Yeah, 2 things. And yes, anyone else could have.
What was the other thing?
The one thing was the that, and sorry, we're not going to spoil it because he does do 2 things that help, and the yeah, you know the boom, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he does have 2 big parts. I think he's a good character, and I think
you probably could have given those parts to any other Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yes, but because they're given to him, I still think he serves well, and he's a good character for this movie. Spider-Woman's one of the few that I'm like, yeah, you could take her out and nothing changes in this movie.
Which is the thing, I like Spider-Punk. I just didn't like him in the movie.
I also think this movie did suffer at times, and I noticed it towards the end after I was done. Like, I lost some enjoyment knowing that there's some stuff that happens in this movie, which what happened in No Way Home. It didn't need to happen, and there was no reason that it should have happened to further the plot. We can talk about it after, but
no, tell me now.
Tell me now so I can tell everyone else.
I want to prove you wrong unless you're right, and then
I'll tell you there just wasn't a true justification as to why this person would help this other person when they've only spoken once to each other, and they just got along for that one talk that they had towards the end. It doesn't make sense to me personally, and that's just me. That's just one of those sections. You don't remember that?
No, I'm trying to remember.
That's okay. We can talk about that after.
I'm trying to remember who you're talking about.
Yeah, but...
Which one person?
Say the name. How about this?
Give me the spider character.
How about this? I won't give you the character, but do you know the Halo series? Cortana?
Yes. Oh.
Yeah. That sequence of that person helping a certain character at the end, that makes no sense to me, really, because there's no justification as to why they would help that character.
When they were kind of explicitly somebody else's sidekick earlier.
It doesn't make sense to me, and I think that was just kind of one of those moments of like No Way Home where it's like,
why does this happen?
There's those moments, and that's kind of what took away some of the enjoyment of just like, I feel like we're just furthering a plot here. But still, by the end of it, it was a good movie. It was still fun to watch. I still think you should go to theaters and watch it.
It was one of the... Are you diving into final thoughts?
What do we got next? Just final scores?
Final scores, final thoughts.
I need to add mine up real quick. Hey, wait, what did Rich say? Let's do Rich real quick.
So Rich gave it a 47.5 on his final score. And let me see. He said that was the fastest 2.5 hour movie I've ever seen in my life. Man, I tell you, felt like the story was just getting started. I'm so hyped for the next one. The first one is easily the original, so my mind is kind of feeling like I like the first one more, but the second and third are gonna tell one huge story, so I don't think I'd be able to decide that yet. So
Okay.
that was his final thoughts, and
Fair.
then let's just trim this while we add up our score. Cut out a second. So I was a 47.
Hold on.
This is why you're too harsh on movies sometimes.
I don't know. I was just kind of like
I think
putting those numbers together, and
your wife scored it higher than you did because she was willing to give it 2 5s where you gave it no 5s.
yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like the score totally represents my feelings on this movie.
That's where her 2-point difference comes in.
No? Okay. Anyway. Megan's was a 36 and mine was a 34.
Go ahead and
apparently.
your final thoughts then. That puts this movie at a 41, by the way.
It's still,
overall
that's still good.
41 score.
I think that's a fair score. I'm kind of shocked my score feels low. It doesn't feel that low.
I'm not. You're so harsh sometimes.
I don't know. I feel like I'm being fair like that. This is what's this is what I'm rating right now. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm just trying to. I don't know. See, this is the issue sometimes with these scores for me because, like, they don't totally represent how I feel about a movie, but also I'm just going off of.
They should. That's why I'm so confused on why you say they don't.
Because I'm just going off of the rubric, and it is a 2-hour movie, and so I'm like just trying to like balance it. Of like, I'm trying to be fair to what, like, you know, just being someone who loves movies but wants to be fair. Of like, this is a movie, and it is what it is, and I don't want to let my feelings get in the way all the time. Because I don't want to be that guy that makes excuses for a movie when I'm reviewing it. Because again, this is the average. This is for just normal people. So I try to take that into consideration. But also, when I think about it, it's like, I mean, yeah, I didn't quite enjoy this movie as much as I wish I did. So maybe that is why it's so low. I mean, it is a good movie. It is worth your admission ticket, I would argue, because there's also very few movies nowadays that are worth your admission ticket. But I still think, depending on where you line up with the last movie, being on Twitter this past week and seeing everyone talk about how, like, oh, this is the best Spider-Man movie. Oh, this is so much better than the first one. And
Tom Holland says it's the best Spider-Man movie ever made.
Yeah, and I think they're all wrong. Like, it's so wrong. Like, the first movie is still way better, in my opinion, than this one. The pacing's better. The characters are better. The story arcs are way better. There's way more just moments that click when it, when the music and, like, what's happening on screen, like, everything just works way better in the first movie. And again, I get it. It's, you know, it's your quote unquote sequelitis, but you're setting up for the third part, and it's going to falter because of that. But I just look at what everyone's saying about it. It's just like, listen, I get it. It's one of the better movies to come out this year.
And it's one of the better Spider-Man movies ever.
And it's still, even that, because I think Spider-Man 2, Into the Spider-Verse, and then after that, it's like, I don't
probably this one.
It's probably this one, and I don't really know. But then I go back and I think of like the other Spider-Man movies. Like, I love Amazing Spider-Man. I think it's really good.
Amazing Spider-Man.
It's one of my favorite Spider-Man movies. But the score would probably line up just where this one is. It's like, but there are flaws, and it does hold the movie back. The first Spider-Man, I've rewatched that movie a couple times recently. Willem Dafoe is about the only thing that truly carries that movie to the very end.
Some of the special effects in that one are really rough.
And so,
but I also really appreciate it because it was clearly a person in a costume, not CGI. That one is a battle, I agree, but like for the most part, we're pretty similar. Like Spider-Man 2, is my number 2 spot. Because I think the first Spider-Verse movie is my number 1.
It's better with Overwatch.
It's probably the best Spider-Man movie.
And maybe that's another thing. I just don't see a rewatchability with this one unless I'm watching the first one.
So.
And maybe that's part of it also.
Here's my final thought on this, because I see what you're saying. I also think people are unfairly harsh of sequels way too much, because that first one is almost always a self-contained story.
Oh, totally.
Because there's no guarantee of a sequel when you're trying something as bold and new as that first one.
But they totally set up for it at the end.
They did, but again, they did that in Solo. They did that, like, it's always like
Solo's kind of rough.
They dip their toe in the water to see what the feedback's going to be. And so they got to have that to build on it in case it's greenlit. So nobody would have guessed that the first Miles movie was going to be as successful as it was.
Right.
So they had to do a self-contained story. And they did an amazing job with it. It's fantastic. And it's clear with me that this one is setting up a much larger narrative. And so I have to give credit, because no other Spider-Man movie has attempted this, to leave number 2 on such a cliffhanger. You could argue
but
Amazing
it's not just
Spider-Man
about the
2.
cliffhanger.
Well, no, listen. That I felt no resolution to this movie, because it's not coming in this movie. It's coming in the next one.
But it's not just about the resolution, though. It's about the journey there just as much as the end.
Right. So what I'm saying is I thoroughly actually enjoyed the journey there, and now I'm going to wait eagerly for that ending to see if it justified that journey, because that journey felt like a journey to me. It didn't feel like a self-contained story like the first one. It definitely felt like, here are all the pieces we need to get to where we need to be for part 2. And that's where this movie kind of is jumbled and falls apart a little bit, is that it's laying the groundwork for something else.
Right.
The argument... No, I'm not going to do it. So I get the issues that maybe this movie isn't like, it's not as cohesive as the first one, because it's not supposed to be. It is supposed to be a huge story that isn't contained in a single film. And so while I agree that we have to view this one film on the same merits as any other film, I also think it's unfair. Just like we can't fully grasp Infinity War till we've seen Endgame. Going back, Infinity War is one of the best things Marvel did. When it first,
is the best thing Marvel did.
No, Winter Soldier is the best thing Marvel ever did.
That's a debate we could have.
No, Winter Soldier is by far the best thing Marvel ever did.
I would almost. It's close, but that'd be a good debate.
And then Infinity War. But I would not have told you that before Endgame.
Oh, I would have totally said that before Endgame.
I wouldn't
easily. Have. I don't care what the payoff was in Endgame. All I know is Infinity War was easily. See, that's where I think that argument falls apart, because.
Because the Hulk storyline in Infinity War is still utter garbage.
No, I agree.
Like, there's still a lot of things.
It's not perfect, far from perfect, but it's still the best thing that they've made.
There were still a lot of complaints in that movie about, like, well, where is this character? Where is that character?
In every movie, like,
well, exactly.
Outside of Whiplash,
just
obviously.
Like people complaining about this movie now. And I'm saying, I personally think, if I'm putting my trust in these filmmakers based on these 2 films, that the third one is going to have a satisfying conclusion. And in that case, I would have to say that this is probably the greatest Spider-Man franchise that we will get. We won't know until we see number 3, but if you compare all 3 movies, it's going to be, hopefully, the best 3 Spider-Man movie franchise that we have. Because Tobey Maguire had 2 good movies and then one that was meh. And then
so much potential.
Andrew Garfield only had 2 movies. One of them great.
Darn you, Sony!
The other one had great moments.
Man.
And then we canceled number 3, which was supposed to introduce live action Miles, by the way.
Oh, that would have been so dope.
Yep, it was supposed to introduce live action Miles. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm trying to over justify this movie, but also I don't think it deserves as much criticism, because it's still by far one of the best animated features we've ever seen. It is still
animated features like all time, or are we just saying like,
no, I'd throw it up there.
I don't know if I would say that.
It's up there with me.
I mean, like,
it's definitely better than Puss in Boots.
We are not going down that road. We are not, I would say Puss in Boots is better.
I knew you would.
Yeah.
But
we're not going down that road, though. They're not doing it.
I enjoyed this movie. I get the flaws, but I think I'm just holding back until I can see the final resolution. And it could be that after part 3, I go back and be like, yeah, you know what? That part wasn't needed. That part didn't matter. Cut it. Whatever. And I can say that. But I don't know that until I see the conclusion.
See, and I'm not saying you're wrong for feeling that way. I totally understand that that's a perspective to go about watching this movie, and that depends how you watch it. That's what it comes down to. How are you watching this movie? Are you going to watch it as it is its own individual movie? Yes, there's a movie that comes before it, and there's a movie that comes after it. But how are you going to watch that? I just can't get behind watching it that way, because if I was going to do that, Then I'd have to watch this movie how I watched Force Awakens when it first came out, and I was super excited. There was a lot of flaws in that movie, tons of flaws, and
that movie's flawless. I don't know what you're talking about.
You're just trying to push my buttons tonight, aren't you?
Yeah, the only one I meant was that this is better than Puss in Boots.
Right, but then I look at Empire Strikes Back and I'm like, no, that movie stands perfectly on its own, but we know that there's a sequel coming after that one still, but it holds up well. I could go down the list of movies where that you can make that argument of like, you could watch it with that, but also
Lord of the Rings is the perfect example. Like, there are many who would argue that The Two Towers is the best movie entry in Lord of the Rings.
I've heard a lot of people actually say that.
It's not mine. It's not
still
mine,
a good movie.
But I've heard people say that.
Yeah.
It still stands alone.
Yeah. And I can't like you said, I don't want to feel like I don't want my score to necessarily feel like I'm just bashing this movie, but I went into this movie watching it as its own movie. I know there's a part 2 coming. I'm fully aware of that, and I know that there is a movie before it that was phenomenal and awesome, and I'm not comparing this necessarily to just this first movie. I have to, in a sense of just like which one is better, and how are we building off of like where we've started. And it almost feels like we took a step back with this movie, and I think that's where I left with a lot of disappointment in this movie of just like, you had such a great base to jump off of. Even if you just like evened out, like that would have been perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The issue comes in when they started trying to do more, like we talked about with the animation, with the script, with the characters. Like, it was just too much. It was just too much. You didn't have to do more. You already won all your awards for it. Everyone already admits this is arguably the best Spider-Man movie, possibly next to Spider-Man 2. Have your debates about that, with what you will. But it's just disappointing when you go into a movie that had such a great foundation going into it, and then it's almost like they lost kind of control of it and they kind of went overboard. It's like, I know you're setting up for a part 2 after this, but you didn't have to like do all of this, and that's just disappointing when you're going into that.
I agree, and I think that frustration is where I have the multiverse frustration. I feel like anytime you're dealing with a multiverse, you're trying to jam as much in as possible.
Yes, exactly.
And that's where...
and then balance the story of like, how does it even work then in the context?
And that's where I say this movie does fall somewhere between Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness and Everything Everywhere All at Once. It juggles it not as well as Everything Everywhere All at Once.
It's a little closer to Everything Everywhere All at Once, but...
it's still too much.
It's still too much.
And I think that is overall my number one complaint with this whole franchise, actually, is that it's a multiverse saga.
Yep,
even
exactly.
the first one.
Yeah.
Even the first one. And I don't think, as great as they are, they will always have that flaw for me, because in the comic books, okay, so spoilers for the comic book that's been out for 20 plus years at this point. If you haven't read it after the first one, shame on you anyways. But it does seem that the trajectory they're taking is based more on the Insomniac Miles Morales than the comic book Miles.
These two have done more for Miles than any comic book has ever done.
So, well,
kudos to all of you.
The Miles comic book, the Spider-Man that creates him is actually created by Norman Osborn.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And he's a product of Norman Osborn, basically kind of, I want to say, if I remember correctly, the same kind of a spinoff of the Green Goblin formula, except it was Spider-Man's DNA working with that. So he's a product of that from the Prowler. It got into the Prowler's bag when Uncle Aaron was robbing Norman Osborn.
Okay.
Uncle Aaron drops the duffel bag in Miles's house. The spider gets out, bites Miles.
Interesting.
He interacts with Spider-Man, but the real one that I think is, I'm telling you, the third one could kill me or not, but one of the things that sets Miles apart is that it's his mother who dies.
See, I've got a lot of theories of like, there's someone that's dying in this next movie. I'm calling it already. Yeah. And I've got a couple names that are on the list of who could die.
So I did find it very fascinating that Miguel goes through the timeline of like the Uncle Bens are important, the Captain Stacy's are important.
Yeah, that's a big part of the story that I did like.
And that's a big part of the Spider-Man lore. But one of the things that always stood out to me about what made Miles unique again was that Venom kills his mother in the hospital while she's trying to save people, and Miles can't protect his mother. And like, it was tragic. It wrecked me, and it was so different than any other Spider-Man story. And so I don't know that that's where this is headed, But honestly,
it's up in the air where this is.
Yes,
we don't really. There's nothing in this movie
know.
that hints at it. I think they're heading a direction with it, but I'm gonna save it.
I think they're headed the Insomniac video game direction. Which, if you played the game, you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to head the comic book direction because even in this movie, they talk about breaking the canon events.
Yep, exactly.
And
which I think will play a big part in the next movie.
Yes, but like Miles had an event that wasn't the same as every other Spider-Man, and it made him tragically relatable, and it was fantastic. If I hope to God I'm remembering that storyline right. It has since been retconned, by the way.
Boo!
When Marvel did their Secret Wars and the universes collided, he got his mom back. But I'm like,
God, nothing's fun when you just bring characters.
Exactly.
Screw you guys. Like, you know what? You ruined the movies and shows.
The comics of Miles fighting Venom in the hospital while his mother's there, not knowing that that was incredible storytelling. But I don't know what's going to happen in this third movie. Yeah. I hope it is something unpredictable like that, and I think that will make this journey of this movie worth it.
I hope so too. So I'm looking forward to it.
You've listened to our final thoughts now for probably 25 minutes. All I have to say, if we can sit here and talk about it, there's a lot in this movie to like.
There was a lot that I didn't get to that's like popping up in my head as we're sitting here. Yeah. It's like, oh man, I missed that. Oh, I missed that. Dang it.
There's a lot of good in this movie. It's not going to resonate for everybody.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, or at the end of next year, we're going to end up with 3 movies that are better than all 3 of Tom Holland's movies.
I will say that this movie is definitely making top 10 of the year. Like, that's where this movie is. Honestly, I don't see another movie. I don't see any movie like taking it all the way down to the very bottom. It'll be a top 10 movie.
Yeah. It's better than any Spider-Man movie that Marvel's ever produced. And I'm talking Disney Marvel.
Homecoming's pretty good. I'd have to watch these 2 back to back to really get a.
Is Homecoming pretty good?
I like Homecoming.
I don't, because he's Tony Stark's sidekick.
It works.
They took all of Peter Parker's agency and intelligence of the kid who figured this all out on his own and gave him.
It's a flaw, you could say.
Oh, it's a major flaw to the whole character. I still think I don't think Disney got Tom's Spider-Man right until the final scene of the newest movie.
No, you're right. I agree with that. I can watch the first one's fine because it's the first movie. It
was a fun high school Peter.
I thought it was fun.
I enjoyed it.
I mean, I think it's up. I think you could put it here with like Across the Spider-Verse. Like, it kind of falls in there. Like, Amazing Spider-Man. Like, it's kind of in that like group of like. You got your top 2, and then it's whatever comes after that.
Yeah, I did think it was interesting that we only got a reference to Tom, where we got screen footage of the other Spider-Man.
Disney stuff, I bet.
Because Disney sucks.
Yeah, and that's not a spoiler, really. It's kind of just a small part of the movie. It's nothing huge.
There's nothing major here. But
all right, well, we're going way over, but we had a lot.
We'll let you go.
Yeah, we'll let you guys go. You can call us back next.
You have other podcasts to listen to
in the next 2 weeks. But yeah, so that was Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Feel free to drop your reviews and your comments on what you thought about it. Go ahead and follow us on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify. Share it with all your friends and family.
Go follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, follow us on Instagram, Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter, where I do drop the reviews and just throw out stupid comments every now and then about movies.
Same thing he does here.
Yeah, I just like that I do here.
I just like to poke it.
Same thing that I do here. But yeah, I actually don't know what we're planning on next. I know we got.
Isn't the Flash in 2 weeks?
Is it the Flash? It might be the Flash.
I think the Flash is next.
I know we
up
have
on
a viewer
schedule.
request coming up, and we'll have to.
I am so pumped for this viewer request.
I think it comes after the Flash because there's nothing coming out like that weekend. So. But Flash will be next, which will be our final multiverse movie till next year.
If you haven't noticed, we're doing an every other week schedule. If you haven't caught up on that.
We're going every 2 weeks just for sake of time and just to see how much we actually like doing this.
Bryce and his wife just moved houses. So
we're in the new studio.
Yep, we're in the new studio today. So that took some time. My wife and I might be moving, so that'll take some time. So we just kind of trimmed back to allow time for life. But
as long as things keep going well, this will keep going.
This is working out.
Be cool to do every week, but I think 2 weeks is kind of where we're comfortable at right now.
Right now,
Yeah.
at this point in life, until I quit coaching.
Exactly. Let's just get
Yep.
done with that.
But it's soon.
But anyway, that is it for this episode. Let us know what you thought. Comment, share, spread the word, and go see these movies. They're a lot of fun. And next up will be The Flash. So if just so you can plan for that if you want to.
I am cautiously optimistic about that movie.
I'm just going in to enjoy it.
I
won't all the way, but
I have pretty low expectations, truthfully, but I really want to love it. So
we all will.
we'll see where I lie. I worry it's going to be a multiverse of madness situation, but we'll see.
Let's end on that cliffhanger and call it a day. Thank you all very much for joining us for this episode. We will see you guys in the next episode.
All right.